Hello, welcome to this drafting and stitching tutorial for a Pierre Cardin inspired statement collar, which is detachable, so you don't need a block or anything. You can make it to your own measurements to fit any garment. So you can see I'm wearing mine. It's bright pink, and what's great about it, it's basically like a ruffled Peter Pan collar. And of course mine is quite small, but just imagine this was much bigger or really tiny. You can style it however you want to, and I love it especially worn up like this. And I've used the contrast ribbon so it goes with my coat, so everything is sort of pulled together. And then of course the great thing is, if you want to, you can take it off and put it on any other garment. So now you know how it looks. Let's draft and stitch it together. The great thing about this collar, and what I love about it, it looks really glamorous, but it's basically just a long rectangle. You're going to loop and then stitch in a clever way to create this 3D ruffled effect. And as it's just a rectangle, we only need 2 measurements of your own. The first thing is your collar depth, so however far you want your collar to go down your shoulder, and that is how wide you want your fabric to be. So you can either cut your fabric this wide and then add your facing, but what I'm going to do is I want the edge of my collar to be on the fold. So my fabric is going to be double my final height. So if you want to do that, you're just going to use 1 piece of fabric for the whole collar. The width of the fabric is your collar depth times 2, so doubled up. That means we can fold our fabric and it gives us the really nice effect. And the other measurement you need is of course the length of the fabric, and that is very long, but the way we work it out is we take our whole neck measurement, so it can be to a specific coat, like I'm making it to this jacket, or it can just be your basic neck measurement. It's up to you. But if we made the collar only the same length as our neck, can you see it doesn't lay very nicely, because it's sort of, it wants to stand up and it doesn't have lots of volume and ruffles. So what we're going to add, we're going to add 50% extra to our neck measurement, or half our neck measurement again. So if your neck measurement, for example, is 20 centimeters, which would be very small, you cut that in half, so you have 10, and that means you have to add 10 to your final neck measurement, so 30. So mine, for example, is 26 centimeters, so half of it is 13, so I'm going to add 13 to my 26, so the final fabric width length I'm going to have is 39. So that would create a single layer ruffled collar. So it'd be quite pretty already, and it look really nice on any dresses for a sort of romantic look, especially in a floral. But what's so great about this collar, what makes a statement is that it's double. So we need to double the length of fabric we need again. So that is already our full neck plus 50% extra, so we're doubling it. And can you see now I've got this really nice double layer effect, and I drape it around my neck, and then I will gather it, and can you see that gives us a really nice sort of like a rose petal effect. But on the other side, can you see I've got this, I will have a seam, so that's not that elegant. So what I'm going to do is just move that seam somewhere where you never see it. So I'm quickly going to pin it so you can see how it's going to look like. So basically I'm creating a really big loop. And if you had that seam at the front, as I said, not that pretty. But what we're basically going to do, we're just gonna, because it's just 1 strip of fabric, we can just move the loop to the middle at the bottom, and then we just shift it to our center back at the bottom, so nobody will ever see it. Well, they will, but it won't stand out. But you can see now it's right at the back there. So that is the basic collar, which is going to give you a really nice effect. And I've kept mine quite small, but of course you can make it really big, or you can make it teeny tiny, which would be adorable for a dress. And then the last step, of course, is to now stitch that length of fabric together and we're going to do something really clever at the front so that you can have our ribbon acting like as a collar stand, and then it will sneak through the front here and you can knot it together. Or of course the other option is to do a hook and bow if you're not a bow person. But of course the great thing is if you have a bow, it's sort of, you can put it on anything, and just imagine this was in a fake fur or something. Be very glamorous. So now you know how it works and which measurements you need, which is your collar depth times 2, just to summarize, and also your full neck measurement plus 50% extra times 2. So very long strip of fabric. And of course don't forget to add seam allowance to that. So that's the last thing to remember. But you only need to add seam allowance to your collar depth. So wherever your depth of your strip is, the width, you just add seam allowance either side. And of course you need to add seam allowance to the edge of your long rectangle. So you basically cut out a really long rectangle and then add seam allowance all the way round. So very straightforward. In a second I'm going to show you how to stitch it all together, but before I do that, just a little tip. So I'm using quite a fluffy mohair, but with a collar like that, I would always suggest you interface it because you don't want it floppy. Maybe if you're doing quite a stiff cotton fabric and you make it quite narrow, then you don't have to worry about interfacing it. But even with quite a nice fabric with like this, which has body, I'm still gonna add a layer of interfacing. So I'm just gonna use quite a stiffish thin cotton, and I'm literally just gonna stitch it all together. But once you've decided which fabric to use and you've taken your measurements, we can now stitch it together. So the first thing we need to do, you can see I've got a massive piece of fabric, it won't even fit on the screen. The first thing we need to do is stitch our center back seams together. So that means we're going to fold our fabric in half, right sides together, so your outside, and then all we do is we stitch our center back seam together with your normal seam allowance, just a normal seam, 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeters. I stitch it all together, and then of course it's going to be our center back. So what I now have to do is, fabric is too long for the screen, get the other end of my loop, because now it's a loop, and I pin that to my center back seam. And I now already basically have my collar. So you can see this weird double layer fabric. If I fold it in half, you can see that's going to be my collar. Yeah, so we're nearly finished. So the last thing we need to do is to stitch all these raw edges together. And what we're going to do is slightly complicated, because you don't want to stitch it together like this, because then you've got a big hole. Instead we basically have to stitch this side together first, and then we're going to bag out the other side. So if you turn it inside out again, what I need to do is basically stitch along the top here, but I also of course need to add my gathers or my pleats, whatever you want to use. And at the end of my stitch I need to leave a gap if you want to have a ribbon. So I definitely want to have a ribbon, so I'm going to leave a 4 centimeter gap at the end. My ribbon I think is about 3.5 centimeters. So I'm making it a little bit bigger because you want it to slip through quite easily. You don't want it to sort of be constricted by the loops. So I'm basically creating, can you see I'm creating a gap here, which is going to be the loop where my ribbon goes through. At the moment it looks quite, you have to imagine in your head, but it will all come together, I promise. So you stitch from this pin to this pin, and along the way add your gathers, so you could pre-gather it, but the final length you want is your neck measurement. But you've got our loops, haven't we? So you need to, if you're creating loops, you need to take off your loops from your final neck measurement. So my neck measurement is 26. So I've got two 4 centimeter loops, which make it 8 centimeter. So that's 26 centimeters. Take away 8. So my final stitch length needs to be, let's do our maths, 18 centimeters. So you can add lots of gathers or little pleats. If you're adding pleats, if you add them just randomly on both sides, it's going to be more even. But if you want a more spectacular look, I'm actually going to put all my pleats equidistant, so at the same distance along. So I think I'm going to do probably 4 pleats on each side. And then I'm going to make sure my pleats, so if that's our pleat, I'm going to make sure they both face the same direction, because if I now turn it inside out, I can show you basically. If you have the pleats facing with the same direction, it looks, well, it should be identical. It gives you basically more volume because it's double the amount of volume in one place, so we get these little puffs together. But of course, for more equal volume, you might just gather it and it's going to give you really nice even volume. But whichever the technique you decide on, tiny gathers, pleats, big pleats, choose them, pin your fabric or pre-stitch it, and then stitch it to your final neck length minus your loops. And once you've done that, we're going to do the other side, but we need to do that a little bit different. All stitched, and if you watched the little clip on the sewing machine just now, you might have noticed that I switched halfway through. That's the reason, because I have both my pleats going in different directions, so they're all facing towards the center back. So I switched halfway through because it's so many layers of fabric and it would have been impossible to stitch against the pleats, so I had to switch. But you can see this is our one side, so now I'm just going to turn it inside out again, and you can see this is how the collar is going to look. So much better on the outside. And I quickly want to show you how the final collar, so the final collar is going to look like this. You can see now how I'm getting the volume already. But what we need now is, of course, do the same to the other side. So we stitched one side of our loop together, but we still have to stitch the other side. But well, I always do it with stitch, because if you ever stitched a waistcoat and you stitched all the seams of inside and then try to turn it inside out, you might realize that you can't. So I did it once and I regretted it. So nowadays, what I always do when I need to bag something out, I actually have my outside showing. Then I fold my seam allowance in, how my final seam needs to look, and then I turn it inside out. And most of the time it ends up as I thought, but I always double check. Better safe than sorry. It takes you 10 seconds. So what I now need to do is basically do exactly the same to the other side. But of course at the end we need to turn it through. So I need to leave a little gap somewhere. In theory, what you could do is that you just make one of the loops bigger at the end, you know, where you're leaving for the ribbon. So you could leave this a little bit bigger, like twice the size, to turn it inside out. And the other option is to just do like a 10 centimeter or 4-inch gap at the center back. Either one works Well, we're basically just going to repeat exactly the same we did here on this side. So leave enough space to thread your ribbon through, and then pleat or gather as you like and stitch it all together. Here we are, I've stitched it all together, and now I just need to turn it inside out. So you just find your hole and you start pushing it through. And here we have it, very odd looking shape, which is going to turn a collar. So what you have to do at the end, where you have your, where you left it open, where your ribbon is going to do, is pull these together and then pull them to one side. And can you see, suddenly you're starting to get the collar shape. But at the moment it doesn't want to lay flat, so I'm actually going to iron it very carefully on the seam. I'm going to iron it flat, and then I'm also going to iron it slightly in the direction I want it to sit. Here we have it. It's nearly ready and it's starting to look quite nice and sculptural. To finish off we need to do some hand sewing, but don't worry, it's very quick. So what we need to do is basically pin the two layers together. I mean, you could even in theory stitch through these two levels to all the layers in the seam, but you have to be super precise and it's a lot of layers. So it's actually probably quicker to just with a needle and thread just tack it all together, because it doesn't need to be super fine. If you use quite a strong thread, and you can just weave it through and hold it all in place, and then we're done. I'm really going to show you how to pin it, and then you can get stitching. You can see I've pinned some of it already. What I basically do is I start at the loop and I just hold it all tightly together, and you put it through one layer, start pushing through, and then feeling on the other side and checking that on the other side it's coming through on the seam line again, or nearly. Like you can have like 1/2 mil difference, but ideally you want to be on the seam line, and then you can just hand stitch along there, just in, out. And then the last thing you need to do is just quickly also hand stitch your loops together. So just turn over seam allowance on both sides, and then again just stitch them together with a few invisible stitches. And that's your collar done and ready to be styled. So my collar is hand stitched. Now we just need to pick the ribbon. So I've just got my box of grosgrain and rickrack, and I'm hoping to find something. So good grosgrain, 100% cotton, is a bit of a lucky find. Ooh, got some, but it's a bit too short. I've got some Petersham, but that's no good. Ooh, look at this. This was lucky. If you want to use grosgrain, I think the original image probably either has a grosgrain ribbon, or maybe even you could use satin, anything you want. You could make your own. I like grosgrain because it's got that nice texture, and I'll show you a difference. This is a, oh, it's black, you probably won't be able to see. This is a grosgrain ribbon with a bit of a polyester content, so it's shiny. The 100% cotton one, which is mostly made in France, is 100% cotton, and there's different words for it as well, and it all depends whether you want there's some which have a zigzag edge. Can you see that's grosgrain? And then this, I think, can you see that's straight? I think that's Petersham. I'm sure you can find out, or you can tell me in the comments please which one is this. But all I now need to do is put these through my loops, and I will probably, to keep it in place, I will probably just do a little stitch on the center back, because I don't want the ribbon twisting. And I just discovered a pin, which always happens, and it would have been painful. So we're nearly there. So for now I've just pulled it through, but then I will put, I might do is try to get some quite chunky pink thread, or even see where I got in my bin, where I got a little bit of a mohair left over, a thread, and then just maybe do a really big cross so it becomes a feature. And the Pierre Cardin, which inspired this, that of course has some sort of rib bow at the end. I'm not quite sure from the image, but it's got some sort of thing at the back, maybe a loop, a knot, who knows. But here we go. So this is my Pierre Cardin inspired detachable statement collar, and I haven't seen this before. I'm literally just putting on, so let's see how it looks like. So I'm not sure about the bow, that might be a bit too top. So it's a lot smaller than the original, of course, because as always I'm using a remnant, but it has that lovely 3D-ness, so you can either look, that's my 1958 pose. Leave my little hat. Not quite as good, but you can see it's got that effect. It's got a beautiful curve and that 3D-ness, and then of course you can always wear it down. Can you imagine that this is more like an oversized Peter Pan collar? If it was the same color and up to there, it'd be surely very stunning. But even that's quite nice already. So this is my drafting and sewing and overall making tutorial for a 1958 Pierre Cardin inspired detachable collar. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I love a thumbs up, or let me know any suggestions you have in the comments below. And the great thing with this, of course, by making it bright pink, you can wear it with lots of other styles too. That's it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you make this collar, I really would love to see it. Do tag me on Instagram or let me know in the comments below. But for now, thank you so much for watching and enjoy your drafting. Bye!